Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Butler. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I appreciate everyone tuning in and appreciate everyone that maybe will be watching this later. Very honored to be here with you today and to be joined by none other than Dr. Phil Rowe. He is the ranking member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee out of Tennessee. He's a veteran as well, served in the U.S. Army and the Medical Corps, and has been just a real ally of IAVA across the board. We meet with him regularly, meet with his staff. When we bring in our members from around the country for our Storm the Hill, Dr. Rowe and his staff are always very gracious and give us lots of time to hear from our members about the issues that are facing them. We obviously are not meeting in person right now, at least for the indefinite future while we get through this pandemic. So we really appreciate being joined by Dr. Rowe here. I'm going to just talk on a little bit more and then I'll turn it over to him, but want to just say again that it's been an honor working with Dr. Rowe and his team on so many great pieces of legislation, from the Forever GI Bill, the Mission Act, the VA Accountability Act, most recently just passing two very important pieces of COVID legislation to make sure that our veterans continue to, I should say our student veterans continue to get paid as there are changes to their school. It's an honor, sir, working with you and your staff, and thank you for being with us here today.
Jeremy, thanks. It's great to be this. I'm looking forward to this. It's always great to speak to veterans, and especially the younger veterans, and as you all are, post 9/11 for the most part, and appreciate the opportunity. Look, I grew up in a military town, Fort Campbell, Clarksville, Tennessee, where the 101st Airborne was. So I grew up with the military, and my scoutmaster was a first sergeant in the 101st Airborne Division. So by the time I got to the Army, I've been through basic training at Fort Campbell half a dozen times, and I know legally you couldn't possibly do what we did. We jumped off the jump towers. We did all this stuff as kids. And so when I went to basic training at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, I said, look, I can do this stuff, but I've already done it half a dozen times as a Boy Scout. So I grew up with the military, have tremendous respect, tremendous number of veterans in my own family. And I cannot thank our American veterans enough for what they have done. And I hope and I wish and pray that we teach our young people that. About the freedoms that they have right now are not due to what they have done, but the blood, the sweat, and the tears, and the sacrifice of America's veterans for 230 years in this country. And I know I'm appreciative. This old veteran certainly is. And the toughest day I have of the year, every year, is Memorial Day. When we memorialize those lost that gave the ultimate sacrifice, not Veterans Day. We got through it, but Memorial Day, it's a tough day for me. And so when I got to Congress, I asked the then leader, Boehner, who became speaker later, to put me on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I said, look, I've served in the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea. I know the military well. I'm a doctor. Many of the questions that are answered, I did some of my training in a VA hospital. I saw VA patients in private practice. Here in Johnson City, Tennessee, where we have a large VA medical center. It was a perfect committee for me. So he did. He moved someone off the committee and put me on. And I've been forever grateful for that, and had a chance. You know, when you go to Congress, and I'd already had a 31-year career, Jeremy, as a practicing physician. And so I knew I wasn't going to be a career in Congress. I wasn't going to be a 30-year guy. So I set my goals on trying to make a difference in this committee. And I looked and listened, and certainly we saw when I came to Congress in 2009, I still remember General Shinseki coming up, and one of the first hearings I went to, 4-star Army general, great respect for General Shinseki. And he announced there were a million backlog disability claims. I could not believe that. Of course, I'm naive. I'm a 62-year-old freshman, and I'm thinking, this is insane. And so then 14 came along, and the Phoenix scandal came along, and we passed a bill then which helped, and it helped build on the Mission Act, which was the culmination of several things. And much of the Mission Act hadn't been rolled out yet. I used the GI Bill when I got out of the Army in 1974. And 75 and 76, I used it. It's $300 a month. I had a young family, had a very young son and one on the way, no money. And I'm forever grateful for that help that they gave me. I was able to use it for 2 years. And we thought, and I think the GI Bill helped transform a nation after World War II. And so and John Clark on our staff's just been terrific. And you guys have been terrific in working with John about putting together an education package so the young people didn't graduate with $50,000 or $100,000 in debt. And some of these medical students have $200,000 in debt. My dad was a factory worker. My mother was a bank teller, and I graduated from college, and I stayed at home, worked while I went to college and medical school with zero debt. Can't do that now. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was I knew what that did for me and my family. And so I wanted to get the most generous benefit we could, and making that a lifelong benefit was something that really was special for me. And the idea of how quickly things change. And I want to give a shout out to the Congress. You know, we don't get many. There are only 3 things that poll worse than Congress, and that's Lindsay Lohan, meth labs in North Korea. And I'm not so sure if North Korea does anymore. But quickly, when you guys, the students basically pointed out to us when literally through no fault of anyone's, because of COVID, you went from a traditional education to online. And that may change your benefit. And literally in no time at all, we corrected that. And I was very proud of the way the Congress, the speed, because that's a tremendous, when a veteran is looking at a student, is looking at their rent payment at the end of the month, and I might get half what I was getting, I can't pay my bill. So anyway, with that, let's get started with some questions. I've said enough.
Oops, got to unmute. That was outstanding. You touched on a lot of things that we want to talk about, so this is great. Let me maybe start with another quick scene setter here, because you kind of touched on it. Like, your background, I think, couldn't have prepared you more completely to be on the Veterans Affairs Committee. That said, what do you think, which was maybe one of the 2 areas that is more impactful to the work that you do now? Is it the fact that you're a veteran, or is it the fact that you're a doctor? I know they overlapped because you served as a doctor in the military, but I think one of the things, you know, we're all pushing for is to get more veterans into Congress, and certainly then onto the Veterans Affairs Committee, which is sort of like one of the last strongholds of bipartisan work that we'd like to see. So just curious to know sort of your thoughts. What better prepared you if you can choose between those? And do you expect to see a continued bipartisan nature coming out of the committees?
Well, starting from the back, I think certainly one of the fun parts of being in Congress is working on a committee that has a central theme and goal, and that is to help our nation's veterans. And we'll have vigorous debates about things, but it is a bipartisan committee. And I can go and I've been in literally Democrat districts, Republican districts across the country. I am totally agnostic when it comes to veterans. It's not Republican or Democrat for me. It's about what's right for the veteran. And when you can focus on that, it makes your job so much easier when you don't have an agenda that you're trying to do this or that. If you're just trying to say, what is an issue and a problem, and can we solve that problem for the veteran? And so that part was easy. I think preparing me, Jeremy, I think both did. When you look at growing up, as I said, as a Boy Scout, and having a first sergeant, who, by the way, his name was Thomas Thayer, who was killed in 1965 in Vietnam, won the Silver Star, and I grieve for him to this day. And he was a great influence on my life. Johnny Parham was also a friend of mine who ran the 2-mile relay. We ran together in high school, and we were pretty decent too. And I would hand the baton off to him. He died in Vietnam, 1969. I can still see Johnny's face. He's young. I've had a chance to get older, have grandchildren, have a career, serve in Congress. He never got that opportunity because of his service. And so those things drive me every day when I think about that. And I'll tell you, I fly a lot, as you know. I fly 4 flights a week. And when I get on airplanes now, I go to a lot of airports and people don't know who you are. And I'm sitting there and people get on the airplane, and it makes me feel good when they say that an active duty military can board first. I feel good about that. If I've got to sit on my suitcase and an active duty veteran that's protecting my liberty and freedom now and get on, they got my seat as far as I'm concerned. That's the way I feel about it. And I think a lot of Americans do. Like, I came from the Vietnam era, and that was a different tone then, Jeremy. It's much different than it is today, and thankfully. But I think both did. And just wanting to know that you didn't have a career ahead of you. So you had to focus on one committee really, really like a laser beam. And this is what I did. And when I was chair of the committee in the 115th Congress, I told the staff, I said, look, I don't know how long we'll have this chairmanship, but we're going to go all out, pedal to the metal for this next 2 years. And we did. I think we had 25 or so bills signed by the president into law, and passed almost 80. And one I would like to say that almost killed me getting done was the Blue Water Navy. I'm probably the only nerd in the world that actually read a Russian study about and then the Australian study. So I read both of those, realized that you would never prove it 50 years later what happened. So I said, let's just err on the side of the veteran and do what's right for these men and women who served in the Blue Water. So that almost did me in, but we got that signed into law. So, I mean, I had so many hiccups. That started in 2010 trying to get that done, and it finally got signed into law in 2019. So you can't give up.
Absolutely. No, and that's great. And that I'm going to hold on it, and we're hopefully going to get back to it, but that ties in perfectly to talking about burn pits and the toxic exposure issues that we're dealing with today. But before we get to that, I do want to ask you about sort of the breaking news of the day, which was that the administration, their Prevent Task Force roadmap was released today. For those that are listening and aren't familiar, I'm going to try and get the acronym right, but it's the President's Roadmap to Empower Veterans and End the National Tragedy of Suicide. This was an administration-driven task force to get it just that. It started last year. It was delayed a little bit because of the pandemic, but they rolled it out today. Really proud to see it. Saw that you put out a press release, and would just love to get your thoughts on the roadmap and the next steps.
You know, we had Dr. Van Dalen, who was in charge of the roadmap in our district last December. And also follow that up with Dr. Adams, who is the Surgeon General, in January, to really talk about suicide and also to talk about opioid overdose deaths, drug overdose deaths, which are tied together. We have around 20 veterans. I remember sitting in my office about almost 3 years ago, and we were going over our budget. And I said, well, how much money are we spending on mental health at the VA? It was $7.5 billion, a lot of money. I said, well, how much did we spend in 2003, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago? I said, well, $2.5 billion. So I said, we've tripled the amount of money, and we haven't moved the needle one bit. So I said, we need to be doing something different. And this year's budget, I think, is getting close to $10 billion total in the mental health. So the Prevents Task Force is there to see if there are new ways that we can go about helping not only veterans, but suicide is a pervasive problem in society in general. And so, as luck would have it, this morning at 10 o'clock, we had a rollout with the Prevents Task Force. We had Chairman Takano and myself were on a call with them. So we'll have a chance to deep dive it and see what they have. And we haven't had that opportunity yet, but we're very excited about the attention. And COVID sort of took our eye off the ball for a few months, but I think it's still out there. It's still a huge problem. And as a matter of fact, COVID may have made it worse, Jeremy.
I agree. I think that's great. And I saw the statement that your office put out with the release now, and appreciate that, you noted that one of the next really big focus points is going to be on legislation. Now, Congress has a role to play in this, and I think there's great pieces of legislation on the House and the Senate side that we really need to focus on, and look forward to working with you and your team to get these passed. With that, we're at about 15 minutes of the hour. I do want to take some questions that some people have written in to us. So I am going to pause and ask Hannah from our team to ask you the first question.
Thank you, Jeremy. So Dr. Rowe, this question is for you, and it's from a woman named Catherine. When is a fund going to be established for victims of burn pits?
Well, Catherine, I like your name because my oldest grandchild is a Catherine, so we're going to get along well. And Jeremy mentioned burn pits a minute ago, and let me digress just a moment and start back with one of the reasons I ran. I was going to run 5 terms and then hang it up. And believe me, when you're in my job, that makes a lot of people happy when you hang it up, both Republicans and Democrats. Happy. The Republicans in my district are happy you're gone because they can all run for Congress, and the Democrats are gone because they want you gone from day one. But I stayed on for an extra 2 years to begin to roll out the electronic health record. And let me explain why I think that is so important, how it links to burn pits. If a young soldier now gets signed up at 18, we'll enter them into this electronic health record. And this is a massive, I've rolled out, I've been in Congress, this will be 12 years. So 13, 14 years ago, we rolled out an electronic health record in our office. It is not easy to do. We invested a lot of money. So I have some experience in how to do that. And this is a massive undertaking, 170 plus medical centers, 800, 900 outpatient clinics, and on and on. So it's a massive undertaking. The Department of Defense is doing the same thing. You come in as a young soldier, you get an electronic record. You go to Afghanistan, and look, we're not through. Unfortunately, the world is not going to be at peace 20 years from now. We know that we're going to have an active military. That young person is deployed, a burn pit, a chemical weed, whatever. 50, 60 years ago, look, I didn't think I was going to be, almost 50 years, 40 something years since I was in the military. That time has gone by. We're going to be able to follow that person now with a lifetime virtual electronic health record. So at my age, you could pull up and say, okay, here are a bunch of people in their 70s who served in Afghanistan 50 years ago when they were 20 years old. And we found out that they have this disease. I mean, literally with the punch of a button, we can figure it out. Right now, we don't have that capacity. So we're guessing about what's going on. I think the burn pit registry is a good idea, but it will not ever replace getting this information. And this electronic record is going to be a treasure trove of medical data. So we'll know, is there, like, for instance, Jeremy, in your age group, 30, 40 years goes by, you'll be an older veteran, and we'll be able to look and say, okay, here, maybe it's heart disease, maybe it's cancer, whatever it might be. So that's being looked at. To answer Catherine's question, that's being looked at, but it's just in its infancy and early stages, I can tell you that.
No, and that is a great point. I like that, how there's so much more to it. It's not just about the toxic exposure. It's about the linkages between tracking all this and making sure we get all the data. Thank you. Hannah, next question.
Dr. Rowe, this is from Tyreek, and his question is in regards to the Forever GI Bill. If your active service ended prior to January 1, 2013, you are still subject to the 15-year time limitation. Why were so many post 9/11 veterans excluded from this law? Given the realities around TBI and mental health, it could be some time before a veteran is on good enough footing to go back to school. Will you advocate to change this to include all post 9/11 veterans?
Tariq, one of the problems that we had is obviously budgetary. You have to, we still have to pay for these things because it's a very expensive benefit. I mean, it is a tremendous benefit, but it's very expensive. So you had to put it somewhere. It's exactly like we did, and we have gone back, and I'm not saying we won't. The future Congresses won't. I can't speak for them. But part of the Mission Act was, remember that a catastrophically injured post 9/11 injured, let's say you lost your limbs and your spouse, your husband or your wife stayed home with you as your caretaker, we paid money for that. We gave them a stipend and provided health insurance if they needed, because it was better for the veteran and better for the VA, quite frankly, to have the veteran taken care of at home. But we did not take care of pre 9/11. That means every veteran who served in World War II is a service-connected disabled veteran, or Korea or Vietnam, as in my era, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, left them all out. And it was strictly done because of finances. In the Mission Act, we included them for the first time. So, Tariq, I'm not saying that that in the future it won't happen, but it was basically done. We had to have some starting point, and that's why it was picked that way. good point you made, but it's still about money. Jeremy, let me say one thing about the budget. And you see this stuff posted on social media all the time. When I got to Congress in 2009, the entire budget of the VA, and it has actually 4 missions, but the main 3 are cemeteries, healthcare, and benefits. And that was $97.5 billion for all of that. This year, the president's ask this year was $220 billion. And maybe as much as 240 if you count the 19.7 billion that Congress appropriated in the CARES Act for the COVID response, which the VA has done. So they've been, the administration has been very generous, and the Congress has been very generous. And look, the taking care of veterans is an evolving process. Things change, people live longer. We're learning more things about what exposures have done to people. So in your education benefit, that's the reason. But I'm certainly not saying that a future Congress wouldn't take a look back. They very well may.
Yeah, and it's the budget number is always an important one. I often tell people that, even if they are not in the military, they don't know a veteran, don't have a veteran in a family, if for no other reason, they should be concerned and focused on veteran issues, because it is such a large part of our country's budget. And it should be, they should be concerned about how we're spending that money and making sure that we're spending correctly on our veterans.
Yeah, it's Jeremy, it's the VA budget is 5 times the budget of the state of Tennessee. That's how big it is.
That is incredible. That's a good perspective for it. You start to lose perspective when you start talking billions and everything and government money. Thank you, sir. Hannah, I think we've got another question as well. We got about 8 minutes left, so we'll try and get in as many questions as we can.
Great. So this question is from a constituent of yours, Dr. Rowe, Blue Water Navy and Vietnam War veteran James Williams in Greenville, Tennessee. A close family member of his died recently of his exposure to Agent Orange in Vietnam. He and others with those exposures are casualties of that war. Are there any plans to recognize them on the Vietnam Wall or other memorial?
James, first of all, thank you for your service in Vietnam, and thank you. He lives in a great community. I know very, very well. I have a lot of friends there. The answer is I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. And certainly that exposure, no, and Agent Orange, I look back and thinking, okay, at the time, they didn't realize what this would do. I mean, no one really knew. And I had a friend that one of the best friends I'll ever have in my life was in Thailand, and they sprayed the perimeter of his base, Air Force Base, because they were getting ambushed in the jungle. I mean, you're getting shot at. So it's either you get shot now or clear the jungle back where you can see the enemy coming. And he developed a very rare lymphoma and died literally within a year of this exposure. I have no doubt in my mind that that's why he died. So you make a great point. I don't have an answer for it, but it's something we should certainly consider, because I think the people who died of that are a casualty. Maybe it could be a separate place. And that we see that in lots of wars, things that have been used at the time they didn't realize that. I didn't know they spread the DMZ in Korea where I was. I tromped all through. I had no idea that was done. Didn't know it until literally I was on this committee 40 years later. So that's the best answer I have.
No, that's a good answer, and we appreciate it. And before we take another question, let me just put a plug in, one for IAVA's quick reaction force. If anyone has additional questions or concerns or anything that they're looking for support for, they can go to our website, IAVA's website, and get help through the quick reaction force. They can also dial 855-91-RAPID to get connected to a peer-to-peer counselor. But then I also like to say that Dr. Rowe very graciously offered that we can relay questions to him for his very strong position to be able to get help. And if you want to touch on that, so rather than trying to explain it for you, IAVA would be happy to be sort of a conduit for appropriate questions for you.
Yeah, if there are issues out there, for instance, not necessarily casework, but issues out there affecting the VA, we have during this COVID epidemic, since we've been home a lot, we have a 1 hour. The chairman have a 1 hour along with our ranking members and chair of subcommittees. conference call every week with the secretary, and along with the undersecretary of health and benefits, Dr. Paul Lawrence. So we are in contact with them once a week. So if something, Jeremy, comes along with your membership that you feel needs to rise to that level, get it to me, and next week I'll make the call. I'll make the ask.
That's great. Thank you. We definitely appreciate it, sir. So we won't send everything your way. We'll try and screen and handle things at first, but if we run into roadblocks, we'll definitely take you up on that. So thank you in advance for that. I think maybe we've got time for one more question. Hannah, if you could go to the next question, please.
Sure. This one is from Dan Fazio. Congress passed 2 bills this spring to help protect GI Bill benefits for student veterans whose schools went online to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. What more can be done to further assist student veterans returning to school this fall or winter?
It's a great question. A great question. We're going to have to be very flexible about what happens because we don't know how school is going to open this fall. We have East Tennessee State University here in Johnson City, along with Milligan University, Tusculum, King College, all within a 9-iron from where I live. So basically, those schools haven't answered this because they don't know what the pandemic is going to look like in the fall. I feel pretty comfortable, and this is probably a good segue with his question into the fact that 42% of all of our deaths that have occurred from COVID have occurred in nursing homes and long-term care facilities. That's only 0.6% of the population. And I want to give the VA a shout out right now. They've really stepped up across the country as their 4th mission and have gone into many of these nursing homes and long-term care facilities. For instance, you had 70 veterans die in a state veterans home in a state-run, not VA-run, but a state-run home in Massachusetts. They went in there with the equipment, with the training, with the nurses and folks, and showed them how you can have COVID patients along with your other patients and not cross-contaminate those folks. So I think we're just going to have to see what the fall looks like. But I can tell you, your organization, IAVA, is very important in getting information to the Congress because we will act rapidly, as you could see what we did in the fall, literally in a week. 10 days, you all had that information, Student Veterans of America and you guys, and we got together, boom, had this done and on the president's desk. So we want you to have your benefit, the one that was promised and guaranteed with your service, and make sure through no fault of your own, how things are kind of messed up, that you don't get caught up in that. And I graduated from Austin P, which is at Fort Campbell, and they have a huge number of veterans there and active duty military who attend college. So it's actually almost went to it's not a military school, but it kind of acted like one because there's so many people there who have a touch on the military.
That's awesome. Thank you, sir. And I'm gonna wrap up, and I'm gonna close with one last question because I think everyone listening needs to know because it's something that they can help us reach out to their members of Congress to work on. So first, I'll just start by saying thank you again for your time and everything that you do as ranking member and as a veteran and as a doctor in Congress, fighting for all of us. We so appreciate it. We appreciate you meeting with our members and our staff. We couldn't ask for the better support from you and your team. So thank you for that. But maybe on closing remarks, would love to hear from you on the Veterans Economic Recovery Act. Because I think that's a great piece of legislation that it's starting from scratch now, and we want to be here to support getting it across the finish line.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, but I'll sort of cliff notes it and make it as I can. It basically is we have 9% of our veterans who are unemployed, and if you're used up your GI Bill, for instance, and yet you still need to be retrained to do something else, and things look. I mean, we're having a conference on the internet now, so a lot of people are going to be working in different venues than they were before this COVID pandemic. So it allows you, if you've used up your benefit or you've never had the benefit at all, to use this benefit to go get some training. And we took part of the post 9/11 GI Bill, the Forever GI Bill, the Montgomery GI Bill, everyone we could think of, and made it possible so people could go back and get retrained. And what I really liked about the Forever GI Bill was this pandemic showed us exactly why we were right when we did what we did. You don't know what's out there. And so you could be 45 years old, a pandemic happens, you've never used your GI Bill, that 15 years has gone by. In my case, it was 10, and you lost your benefit. But the world is changing very rapidly, and we know the benefit of that GI Bill. So we want to make it as long as we can available. So you're 45, 50 years old, you got to totally retrain for a new world. This will allow you to help do that.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll have more information on that. People can come to us for more information on that act, and we look forward to working with you and your staff to get that and other pieces of legislation through.
It's a great bill. We need to work everybody, make sure they get on it.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to make sure we talked about it. So I appreciate you taking an extra minute on that. And as always, thank you again, sir. Great to have you here with us, Dr. O.
Jeremy, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. You do the same. Take care.